Klingensmith. One Yuletide, King Volsung entertained his friends and his vassals. All down the great hall burned roaring fires. King Volsung sat in the high seat with his guests on either hand. In the middle of the hall grew a large tree, the foliage of which covered the roof. This was called Odin's tree. As the ale horns passed around and the hall resounded with the laughter of the warriors, a tall old man strode in with sword in hand. With a single blow he drove the sword into the roof tree up to the hilt. Then he exclaimed, "He who draws out this sword shall have it as a gift from me, and he will find that he has never wielded a better sword." With that he strode out, and no man dared ask his name or whither he went. But the guests whispered that it was Odin himself. All tried to draw out the sword, but it was immovable. When Sigmund, King Volsung's son, touched the sword, it was so loose that he drew it out with no effort. After many years, Sigmund was slain in battle and the sword was broken, but the pieces were kept by Sigmund's son, who was called Sigurd the Volsung. Sigurd was the bravest and strongest man in all the world. His eyes were so keen that few men dared gaze at him. His hair was golden and hung down over his shoulders, which were as broad as two men's shoulders. His shield was of burnished gold with a dragon upon it. All his armor was of gold, and every piece had upon it a dragon, like the dragon upon the shield. When Fafnir went away with the gold that had been given by Odin for the death of the otter, he changed himself into a great dragon and lay on Gnita Heath guarding the treasure. Regin knew that he was not strong enough to kill the dragon, and so he made a long journey to the land of a wise king to ask his advice. The wise king sent him to Sigurd the Volsung. Regin told the Volsung of the hoard, and Sigurd vowed to kill the dragon. From Odin he received the good horse Gran, and only needed a sword sharp and strong enough to pierce the dragon's horny skin. Regin made a sword, but when Sigurd struck it upon the anvil, it broke. Regin made another sword, and this also Sigurd broke. Of the pieces of the old sword which Odin had given to his father, Sigurd bade Regin make a new sword. When the sword was finished, Sigurd cleft the anvil from top to bottom with it. Then he went to a river and held the sword in the water. A piece of wool floated against it and was cut. Sigurd mounted Gran, and taking the wonderful sword, rode to Gnita Heath where lay the dragon. When Fafnir heard him coming, he tried to creep away into the water, but Sigurd lay in a hollow in the ground and pierced him with the sword as he passed over. Then Regin came and refused to share the gold with Sigurd as he had promised. When Sigurd demanded his share, Regin spoke smoothly, but in his heart he meant to kill him. Regin bade the Volsung roast the dragon's heart for him. While Sigurd was roasting the heart, he burned his fingers. Putting them into his mouth, some of the dragon's blood touched his tongue. At once he understood the song of birds. "Regin means to kill you," sang the birds in the treetops. "Cut off his head and eat the dragon's heart yourself." Then Sigurd killed Regin and ate the heart, and immediately he heard two eagles overhead talking together. They spoke of a castle on a mountain top surrounded by blazing flames. Within the castle slept a maiden whom Odin had pricked with the magic sleep thorn. No horse but Gran, they said, will go through the firewall, and no man but Sigurd is allowed to wake the maiden. Sigurd followed the dragon's track until he came to its den. There he found the treasure in two chests. He put the chests on Gran's back, but Gran would not move until Sigurd mounted him. Sigurd rode until he came to a mountain. At the top was a flickering light as of fire, and the flames shone upon the sky. As Sigurd rode through the flame wall, he saw a castle. He went into the castle, and there lay an armed knight asleep. When he took off the helmet, he saw that the knight was a woman. Then, with his wonderful sword, he cut off the maiden's armor. She awoke and said, "Who is this who dares to wake me from this magic sleep?" Sigurd told his name, and the maiden said she was Brunhilde. Sigurd stayed for 3 days, and when he left, he gave Brunhilde Andvar's golden ring, not knowing there was a curse upon it. Then he travelled south with the treasure, to the realm of a king called Gwyke. This king had a beautiful daughter whose name was Gudrun. When the queen saw Sigurd, she was pleased with his beauty and his strength, and wished him to marry Gudrun. One night, when the warriors were feasting, she gave him a cup of magic drink, which made him forget Brunhilde. Soon he married Gudrun and no longer remembered that he had ever seen Brunhilde. After a time, Gunnar, the king's son, heard of Brunhilde and wished her for his wife. Brunhilde had sworn to marry the man who would ride through the wavering fire around her castle. She swore this vow because she was sure no horse but Gran would go through the fire, and that Gran would not move unless Sigurd rode him. Gunnar tried to ride through the fire, but his horse shrank back. Then he mounted Gran, but Gran would not move a single step. Then the queen gave Sigurd a magic drink which made him look like Gunnar. Sigurd mounted Gran, and the good horse plunged into the fire. The flames blazed up into the sky, but as Sigurd rode on flickering fire, the wall sank back, and soon he came to Brunhilde. Brunhilde was sad because it was Gunnar and not Sigurd. And after 3 days, Sigurd took Andvar's golden ring and went back, and the queen changed him into his own likeness again. Then Brunhilde became Gunnar's wife because she had sworn to marry the man who would ride through the fire. One day, Gudrun told Brunhilde that it was Sigurd who had ridden through the flames and not Gunnar. Brunhilde reproached Gunnar until he threatened to have her chained. Then she opened the door of her bower wide and wept and wailed until Gudrun begged Sigurd to give her gold to quiet her. When Sigurd went into the bower, Brunhilde lay upon a couch, and he remembered that it was he who had awakened her from her magic sleep. When Sigurd remembered Brunhilde, he wished to take her and go away to the castle, but Gunnar had him killed while he slept. When Brunhilde saw that Sigurd was dead, she killed herself with the same sword. Gudrun mourned for many years for Sigurd. At last her 2 brothers gave her a cup of magic drink, and she forgot him, and became the wife of King Atli, the brother of Brunhilde. Atli was angry because of Brunhilde's death. Besides, he wanted the gold which Gunnar had taken when Sigurd was killed. So he sent Gunnar an invitation to come visit Gudrun. Gudrun, knowing that Atli meant to kill her brother, sent him word to not come, but he never received the message. Coming into Atli's palace, he saw many armed men. Atli said, "Give me the gold, which by right belongs to Gudrun." Gunnar refused, and Atli's knights jumped him with his men. At last, only Gunnar and his brother were left alive. The brother was tortured to death, but he would not tell where the hoard was kept. Then Gunnar's hands were tied, and he was cast into a den of serpents. Gudrun brought him a harp, and he played upon it so sweetly with his toes that all the serpents but one was charmed to sleep. This one, an enormous adder, crept upon him and bit him, poisoning him. Gunnar had hidden the hoard in the Rhine, and no man could find it. In revenge for the death of her kindred, Gudrun killed Atli and his 2 sons and burned the castle. Thus Andvar's words came true, and the gold brought only trouble to its possessor.